Thank you. Remember me from way back in the day? Little riding around the corner from Benjamin Mays. I'm amazed that we made it this far. A poor black family is all that we are. Wish it upon a star for a trace of happiness. My mama doing her best, but she ain't making no progress. Maybe it's a test that we all gotta pass. My situation's making me grow too fast. 13 and a half years old, standing at the bus stop alone in the cold, on my way to be degraded for a fee to help get my family off the street, called sesame. Can you feel what I feel? Can you hear what I hear? Can you see what I see when my feet hit the streets? So what you know about Sesame Street? For those who love God and trap music, the rise of the Outkast Generation. I'm an ethnographer. Actually, I have an undergraduate degree in mathematics from the University of Georgia. And I got that degree because I was trained in the Benjamin E. Mays Math and Science Academy, right over on Benjamin E. Mays Drive. And I didn't really like math. It was just something I was good at. I kind of liked the formulas, I liked the patterns. And I didn't want to teach. At least I thought I didn't want to teach. I kind of ran from it. I'm from a family of educators. My mother is an educator. She's a retired middle school teacher from the Atlanta Public Schools, but I didn't want to do that. But somehow, I ended up in a master's of curriculum and instruction in Los Angeles, studying to get a degree and teaching under emergency credential. And it changed my life. I was 22, 23 years old, teaching high school in Manhattan Beach. If you know anything about Los Angeles, you know Manhattan Beach is where the rich folks live. And many of my students did not see a black face until they got to high school. Elementary, middle was all about, they were all going to school with students from, or their friends who had parents who were rich and wealthy. So by the time they got to high school, that's when they got a rude awakening around black, brown, rich, poor, just a diverse classroom, but it's something that they had in common that they didn't even know. They were coming to class with a hip hop sensibility. I could see it in their clothes. I could see it in the way they wore their hats, some of the words they were using. And many of the words they were using were words that were coming out of Atlanta. And having an Atlanta sensibility, I was able to see that. At the same time, I was interested in writing for magazines because I saw a hole in the way in which the South was being written about. The music, the culture, the food, the lifestyle, the places we go to celebrate, strip clubs, all of that was being written from an outsider perspective. When I read them, I could see it. And so I decided to have a conversation with a friend of mine. His name was Asbury Foster. He went to Douglas High School. And Asbury was a photographer for Rap Pages. And I said, I really wish that I could write for some of these magazines because they need me. I'm from Atlanta. I'm from the South. I can give them that perspective that's missing in those magazines. And he introduced me to the music editor for Rap Pages. If you know anything about Rap Pages was like the West Coast Source, right? And it was published by Larry Flynt. A lot of people didn't know that Larry Flynt published Rap Pages, but it was one of his top magazines other than Hustler. And so my music editor said, I want you to choose one of your favorite albums, and I want you to write a 500-word review and send it to me. And I chose Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, and I reviewed it. And about a month later, he was assigning me the So-So Def Bass All-Stars Volume 3. And shortly thereafter, I saw my first publication in a magazine. Now, here's an interesting story I want to share with you, though. When Southern Playalistic came out, I have these golden memories of riding around the I-285 loop with my best friends, B. Jackson, Kwesi Elder, Chad Turner, Crystal Hart. We all went to Mays. And we went around the loop so that we weren't disturbed at all. We could listen to the album from beginning to end, intermittent conversations about what we were hearing and who we were hearing it from. For example, on Call of the Wild, Cujo says, "I want to send out a call to the wild to my people in 90. Oh, we lost our minds, because we were class of 90. And I was like, oh, Lord, he talking about us. But the thing about hearing how dope this music was from your peers was doing something to us. It was a part of feeling a shift happening in the city around who the cultural influencers were and how they were about to change the world. A year later, Soul Food comes out, November 7th, 1995, on my birthday. And when I heard Sesame Street and heard Benjamin Mays, when I heard Gip, when I heard Timo, when I heard CeeLo, when I heard them all talking about their schools, their peers, but also they were critiquing schools while also giving you a different ideology on how to look at the world and what it meant to grow up in Southwest Atlanta. These stories were very much rooted in what I've come to call the language of schooling. Because in Atlanta, I think that we've forgotten the role that the Atlanta public schools have played in creating this social justice history and all of this opportunity and access. I mean, Dr. King went to Booker T. Washington High School. So if our schools haven't been incubating our spirits, then what have they been doing? And so I had this theory. What was happening at Douglas? What was happening at Mays? What was happening at Farrell? What was happening even in the Fulton County schools around a particular time? Because there is a class of influencers that come out of those communities who have changed, literally changed the world. They have literally created a whole new lexicon for talking about Black culture, Black people, and how dope we are. The idea of Outkast, when you hear this rise of the Outkast generation, I'm not saying Outkast generation because I love Outkast or I'm trying to romanticize Outkast. Outkast is innovation. It stands for, so it could easily be the rise of the innovation generation. Because what Outkast was able to do was not only give us a new cultural metaphor to talk about who we are as a generation, but what they also do is they give us a new lifestyle. They give us ideology. It gave me a job. I'm an Outkast scholar. I teach classes that use Outkast and their ideas and Goody Mob and their ideas and Killer Mike and their ideas to design games, to design archives, and to teach students how to think about social justice issues. That's bigger than analyzing lyrics. This is theoretical, these are theoretical frameworks and methodologies. So I'm gonna dial it back just a little bit. Not too long after Soul Food comes out, Lil Jon drops Who You With. You know, who you with, get crunk, who you with. And I'm like, Dad, he went to Doug. This is someone who I went to middle school with. And he, Vince Phillips, Rod McDowell, and Dwayne Searcy were throwing parties when we were in middle school. Though that crew that threw parties became BME Records. So it's quite possible that what was happening at our schools was the creation of these startup labels that ended up putting the music out. because the schools were incubating those creative capacities through talent shows. I remember when the New York City Breakers came to Southwest Middle School. I remember when Orange Juice Jones and Houdini came to Southwest Middle School with the task of using hip hop and culture to teach us about not dropping out of school. But that doesn't just happen. There are administrators and teachers that allow for that. So I had a question. What was happening in our schools around the teaching, the curriculum, the administrators? What was in the water to create a very dense population of cultural influencers? Today I had a slide that I was going to show to you because I've been mapping this. And if you could imagine a map of the Atlanta Public Schools, all clustered, Mays cluster, Doug cluster, Washington cluster. What I have found is right on the west side, in the bottom, it's real dense. I've come up with 100 different names. And I'm not talking about just the MCs, the rappers, and the producers. I'm talking about the lawyers, the engineers. I'm talking about the writers. I'm talking about the mayors. I'm talking about Atlanta City Council women and councilmen who are all populating this bottom half. And because I'm an ethnographer, I'm looking at those patterns and I'm asking questions. What were we getting that gave rise to our innovation and our creative capacities? And I'll tell you one of the things I believe it was. Alonzo Krim was the superintendent of the Atlanta Public Schools, I believe from 1974 to 1988. And what Alonzo Krim supported was unapologetic, culturally resilient, black-on-black education. He did not apologize for it. He empowered the teachers to do it. And I said, well, that's how we got the fat boys at the school. This is how we got these MCs and these artists to come to our schools, because the superintendent can block all of that. The other thing that Alonzo Krim did was he gave my master teacher, Asa Hilliard, the opportunity to develop curriculum here at Douglas High School around raising the cultural capacities of black children and awakening the natural geniuses in black children. This is what was happening in the Atlanta Public Schools. Atlanta influencing everything is not a coincidence. This is by educational and intellectual design that you are seeing many of the influencers coming out of the Atlanta Public Schools. We stand on the tradition of Dr. King and him going to Booker T. Washington. It is not by happenstance that these schools are named after black educators, leaders, abolitionists, and people who literally changed the face of the world. So I'm not surprised that we have the rise of the Outkast Generation. I'm really happy that God chose me to document it. I'm currently a professor of hip hop studies over at Georgia Tech. And who would have thought, A, that there would be a field of hip hop studies, right? And then to think that it's at Georgia Tech. The dean of the College of Computing, Charles Isbell, is a Mays High graduate. The vice president of Georgia Tech Research is Raheem Beyah, went to Douglas High School. These are the leaders who are hip-hop based, and they are in position to make a difference on the intellectual side. Because one of the things that I think that we are forgetting in Atlanta is the role that these schools played in advancing the social justice mission. They go hand in hand. When we talk about the Atlanta way, we have to talk about the entrepreneurship and the education, because they work hand in hand. The other thing I want to point out really quickly is the Outkast Generation. I look at it between 1961, those born and raised in Atlanta who went to Metro Atlanta high schools, particularly Atlanta Public Schools and Fulton County Schools, because that's where I'm seeing the density. Between 1961, when APS integrated, first school was Northside, and 1988, when Alonzo Cram passed. That's the range that I'm looking at. And what I'm studying is the language of schooling that are inherent in the rap music, in the narratives, and in the interviews that I've been conducting, and the archives that I've been collecting. So, this is what I'll leave you with today. Du Bois has a quote where he talks about the education of Black people, and I'm going to paraphrase it. And he says that what's going to happen in our schools, Negroes are going to have to go to other forms and other textbooks to learn about who they are. They're going to have to go outside of the curriculum that's been designed for them to learn about how great they are. I would go so far as to say that's already happening. And it's happening through hip hop. Albums are not just albums. Albums are curricular resources. They are opportunities to extract stories and use them to teach more lofty and heavy humanistic perspectives. And I ask you, and I implore you as parents, as teachers and students, to step outside, recognize that Atlanta Public Schools been doing this. This was by design. Put it back in, and let's make sure that we are responsible to that next generation of influencers, and that they too get the opportunity to be as innovative as we've been able to be. Thank you.